Hey guys, welcome to Flowcast, a podcast by Flowout where we chat with successful entrepreneurs, freelancers, and other amazing professionals that are crushing it in their game. We are Flo and Gal, and we'll be your host on this audio journey. In this week's episode, we're here with Zach Hudson, who's building a better e-commerce search at Deft. Without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
Hey Zach, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Gav. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're doing. So I'm really eager to hear all about it. So without further ado, I will just start more generally and ask you, how would your family and friends describe you?
I think if you ask my closest family and friends, it'd probably be goofy, maybe a little bit trustworthy, and a dose of introversion for sure. That's what my closest friends and family are gonna say about me, I would imagine.
Okay, and so you're now building a better e-commerce search at Deft. But I wonder, before that, what did you do? Did you go to college, do anything else before you started building it?
No, I don't think I have some sort of crazy journey that got me to this point, or I don't have some story about how I was building nuclear fission with Lego blocks when I was 9 or something like that. Honestly, my journey was very slow and steady. I went to school for economics. I started off as a stockbroker, taught myself how to code, got a tech job, and then started building my own thing from there. It was a very slow process.
Ah, okay, yeah, that's pretty interesting. And do you self-educate? Do you read books on that topic? Do you listen to podcasts, stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm actually really big on this question. All of my entrepreneurship journey is from self-education. Taught myself how to code, and being in the co-founder role means that you have to do a lot of jobs that other people don't want to do every day. And so the whole point is that you are learning how to do new things and then executing on them. So yeah, I'm trying to think of specific things that I do. Usually I focus on a particular project, like a company that I want to build, and then I use YouTube videos, Udemy's, tutorials, stuff like that to teach myself until I get to a conclusion. So I'm usually project oriented. Not everybody is that way, but I found it was a really good learning strategy for me.
Perfect. We know a lot of times founders, co-founders love to talk more about their product than about themselves. So we're gonna give you, make you a favor and also ask you, what is Deft? What inspired you to start building it?
Yeah, so honestly, the original idea doesn't come from me. It comes from my co-founder, Alex. He was searching for a couch to buy online and was it took him something like 40 hours to find it. And I was building another company called Recommend. It was still in the e-commerce space. It was like Yelp, but for product reviews. And I met Alex at a YC Startup School event back in 2019. And we just enjoyed working together, collaborated on each other's projects for a little while until we decided we enjoyed working together. And I saw my vision for what I was building with Recommend encapsulated in what Alex was building with Deft. So Deft has kind of evolved. It used to be like a very specific search engine for finding exactly what you're looking for. But the way that I would change that pitch now, especially now that I've come on board and we've kind of merged those visions, is trustworthy search. So SEO free, ad free. When you're searching for something, you know exactly what's going to show up on your doorstep.
Nice. And how was it in the early stages, or maybe even now? How did you find the right market fit?
I'll let you know when I get there. But I don't think we've fully answered that question yet. I think at the earliest stages, which we're still in the early days, building search is really difficult, and we're still finding our early audience. So the first market that we started in was furniture and home decor. The people who we started finding market fit with are people like interior designers, people who just bought a new home, Airbnb owners. As we expand into other categories, our market will change, but that's kind of where we found our early success.
I see. And can you talk a bit more about the technology behind it? How does it actually work?
Yeah. So we started building our own kind of natural language parsing. And obviously, we do use some off-the-shelf things that are coming out, which are incredible now. And it really just provides support to the stuff that we've already built. So without getting into too many technical details, we kind of parse our own text. And the other thing that really makes Deft magical is we have our own index. So we're not using Bing, we're not using Google. So when you do a search on Deft, it's a nicely curated group of brands and products.
Nice. And usually with things like that, the things you communicate are the benefits, not how it works. So can you also expand on your current growth and marketing tactics?
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, it's SEO, communities, a really healthy dose of word of mouth. I think at the early stages, the biggest thing that played an impact was just like really grinding, like pounding the pavement to try to bring on our earliest users. And so before we found some strategies around SEO communities that worked, I was jumping in and just inviting everybody I could to try Deft and then talking to them every single day. So my goal was to just have meetings on my calendar where I was jumping on with actual users, watching them use the product and just learning from them.
I see. And now, are there any more channels opening up? Where do you see, your user base coming from in the future?
It's a really interesting question. The channels are always changing, especially something like SEO, which is important to us. I mean, with the introduction of tools like ChatGPT, I'm not sure how the landscape is going to change. So other tools that are working for us, people are starting to share our product out. We've built some kind of interesting share links and affiliate links that we'd like to expand on. We also have some different variations of the product coming out, like a browser extension that should also help with changing consumer behavior, because getting people over to shop Deft is difficult. Like the first time, like everybody's fingers are so trained to type in Amazon or Google whenever they're doing a search. It just is what it is. So I think some of those things will help with growth.
Yeah, that's super interesting, especially the browser extension. But yeah, since you're in the early stages, or maybe if you can like relate to your other product before recommend, are there some common mistakes that you think that early stage startups make, or that you made, perhaps?
Oh God, a million. I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is when I was building Recommend, I was very guarded about my product. I wouldn't talk to other founders, and I think the reality is that no one really has the time to steal your idea, and it's also your idea. So it's interesting to you. It's a vision that you have, and somebody else is unlikely to have it or to execute on it as well as you could. So I'd say share your ideas, because I think it leads you into opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise. Like I met my co-founder, Alex, when I was building Recommend, even though we were kind of building similar things, and I knew he was building something similar, and we bumped into each other and ended up forming an amazing relationship. So that's the first one. The second one is really test your product out. Like build the smallest version of the product that you can, and test it with actual users before you start building the real thing. Like in our case, we don't want to go build an entire search engine like Google from day one. So we had just a form. It was on our website. When you typed into it and submitted it, it would go to me and Alex, and we would fulfill your request manually via email. And that taught us what types of queries people are going to do, how they like their results to look. It taught us a lot about what the product would look like in the future before we actually built it.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty nice advice. And did you encounter any other risk or like challenges as a founder in that space, developing a startup?
Definitely. I mean, I think everybody's experience is going to be different here. For me, I come from a small town in South Carolina. My co-founder is not from like a big entrepreneurial community. So I'd say that was a factor. And it made it more difficult to fundraise, to meet new engineers, to just put ourselves out there and make the startup successful. So that was definitely a challenge that we had to overcome. And again, I think it came back to just persistence for me and just resiliency. I wasn't willing to give up. And I think you'll see that same quality in a lot of other successful founders too.
Okay. And you are currently like building this only with Alex, right?
No, we have 5 people on our team now. So it's me, Alex, two other engineers, and a catalog manager.
Okay. Yeah. So what's your approach to scale in the future? Do you have any plans? Do you have interest to raise funds or stuff like that?
Yeah, so we raised our first round back in 2021. We're thinking about raising another round. It just depends on how things go this year and early next year, because we're just focused on growth right now. Definitely would like to scale the business further. I think for us to get into building search is hard, like I've said a couple times now. So getting into new categories, releasing new versions of the product, bringing on more users, and also just building a consumer product is a difficult thing to do. So we would like to scale further from here.
Do you think there are some lessons that you learn in terms of competing with such big companies, like you said, like Google, Amazon? How is it now treading in these waters with such big players?
Yeah, I think for some of the bigger players, you just have to understand that they're going to be there. They could potentially compete with your business if they even know about you. But the reality is, a lot of them aren't. You're just a fly to them, or not even that. You just don't even exist. So I think it's, for the bigger players, it's good to just ignore. And then obviously, if it does become a point where they're starting to pay attention, that's a good problem to have. Like, you're doing something correct. So it hasn't been a challenge for us. We know the problems with Google and Amazon, and that's why we started building our product in the first place. And users resonate with that. So long as we communicate it, we usually are able to bring those people on board. And there are people, in our case, that are looking for an alternative to those. And that's kind of where we found our early market fit.
Definitely. I think it's a great mentality to have. And I feel like a lot of founders are struggling with that, trying to achieve too much and comparing themselves to such big players, which is why sometimes having some leadership, like mentorship through programs, is very valuable. And you were a part of the On Deck program, right? How was that experience for you?
Yeah, it was great, especially in the cohort we were in. So this is kind of like earlier days of On Deck. They've actually been around a long time now, but at the time it was like the 5th cohort that we were doing. Me coming from a place like South Carolina, I didn't have a big community. Like, I think I worked for one of the 3 tech companies in South Carolina. And I know, I feel like I'm exaggerating, but that's how it felt to me at the time. No one that I grew up with had a software engineering degree. I don't know anybody. So I needed these types of communities to connect with other founders, to learn from them, to get intros for fundraising, to do all sorts of things. And so On Deck played a major role in that, especially at the time. It's obviously changed dramatically. They've grown a lot bigger, and I haven't taken as active as a role in the community lately. But ODF5 and the other On Deck cohorts around that time were fantastic, and I would highly recommend them.
Can you speak more about some key takeaways, learnings from that program?
Honestly, I don't think there was any particular learning. I wouldn't say it was a curriculum that taught me so much. It was just having that sort of real-time question and answer capability that you wouldn't get if you're not in a community like that. When you're a founder, there's a million questions that come up that you need to solve as quickly as you can. And having another group of founders who have been there, done that, and you can ask them those questions is the most helpful part about the community. So I can say, hey, I'm dealing with this, or hey, I'm trying to figure out a contract, or hey, does anybody have an introduction to a lawyer? There's all sorts of things that you need as quickly as possible. And having that community that you can rely on was the most important part. It was kind of the learning for me.
Yeah, I feel like it's always a hard decision if you want to use the accelerator or a similar program to go from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 1,000. What was your approach?
We didn't use it to go to 0 to 1. We already had some traction with users before we got into On Deck, before we got into Launch and Pioneer. So we used it just as our community. And so also at this time, COVID's happening, the world is kind of shutting down. There's no in-person communities left. San Francisco basically moved online, and so On Deck, Pioneer, Launch, these represented our San Francisco online, and so that's just how we used it. I'd say that the greatest leverage was the Q&A that we got. We got some really important fundraising intros that kicked off our fundraise from these communities, and yeah, it's also a support network. Like, being a founder is incredibly difficult, and having other founders that you can like shed some of that stress on, or just have talks with, is really important.
I'm glad you mentioned Pioneer. Do you feel like that was a big milestone in the story of your company, winning there?
Yeah, I think so. That was kind of the thing that kicked it off, and that's right about the time I came on board with Alex too. So Pioneers is different from On Deck. They're not as widespread. It's a much smaller group of founders, and they're all like, everybody I met in there is an incredible founder in their own right. They're all pretty, like, it's funny, they're all across the world. So I really liked the global aspect of Pioneer, and it kind of gave me some perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise. They all seem to be in San Francisco now, or at least they're like floating around San Francisco. So I've gotten a chance to meet up with them, which is incredible. Even though there are just a handful of Pioneer winners.
Yeah, it's pretty nice that these accelerators are just shaping the trajectory of your company, basically. So how has Pioneer affected Deft? Because, like, I watched your demo video as well, and you called it like the Amazon 2.0.
Oh yeah, so different. So different. That was like our very first pitch, and it's changed dramatically since that time. So I'd love to give you a tour of the new one if you want to later. But Pioneer gave us some investor exposure. They gave us user exposure, and I think the most important thing about Pioneer was their formula was or the whole ranking system was based on these weekly updates, and so it held us really accountable in the earliest days. Like, we were still. But when we won Pioneer, we were still moonlighting on the project. We were working our 9-to-5 jobs, and then we were coming home and working on our project after hours. So I think the weekly updates made us really held us really accountable, and it also was great to see our growth in those. So that was the most important factor of Pioneer, at least for us at the time.
Okay, yeah. And now talking about pitching, right? So you said it was very early. So can you maybe compare to what you think a good pitch should look like after some insights you've gotten or that you developed? So
yeah, I think the contrast to that pitch to now is that we tell a much more concise story, like, from our actual users. So I think if you can either tell your own personal story, a user story, or barring those, you have some other story that you can tell that you can at least relate. I think that's really important. Storytelling is a huge factor in being able to like, have people connect with what your vision is. Especially when somebody doesn't understand it. You got to remember, like, when you're talking to investors, they're not an expert in your business all the time. Like, ideally they are, but often they're not. And you're going to have insights that they don't have. So you need a way to communicate that. Charts and all that kind of stuff it's a helpful visual aid, but it's not something that actually gets them to emotionally connect with your story. So I'd say that is a big difference. Just practice it a lot. For us, we made it a goal to get like a yes on every fundraising pitch that we did, every like 20 or so calls, and so we just consistently got better. So I'd say it's less about what makes a successful pitch, but more about how do you learn from all the no's that you get and change your pitch so that it becomes successful. So I'd say that's kind of like the biggest thing. I honestly do think fundraising is just it's a numbers game. Like, at the earliest stages. Like, if you're a second-time founder and you do some sort of exceptional 2-week fundraise, I think that's a very different story from a first-time founder who's going off to fundraise and it takes them 4 or 5 months. So,
yeah, I agree completely. And yeah, so maybe a little more about building investor relationships. Did you like meet with a lot of investors back then? Are you meeting them now? how's that relationship going on, and how would one approach it?
If this is your first time, I would say get a really big list of people that you think you would like to meet with, and then start to narrow that down and make it a little bit more specific. Do your own research, and then see if you can get some like warm intros. And by warm intro, I mean like another founder that they've invested in, or anybody who has had a chance to invest in your business but did not invest in your business is a cold intro to me. Like they're actually worse than a cold intro. Like they're probably gonna compromise the deal, because the other investor is going to start thinking, why didn't that person invest when they had a chance to? So you want to find people who are either like other founders they have invested in, or barring that, I would just do a bunch of cold intros in the early days. So find a big list, narrow it down, message all of them if you can, finding an intro, take the calls. And then as you start to get people onto your cap table, as they start investing in your business, then you can use those as introductions to other investors. It's a numbers game. Like to put it in perspective, I think I talked to, I had 300 people on my list. I talked to 100 of them, or probably more than that, probably like 150 of them, and then like 20 or so ended up investing in the business, like bigger names. So it's totally just fighting for it. So
it just basically like keep going and be persistent, I guess.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so what are your thoughts on like bootstrapping versus finding investment? How did it come to that decision in your case that you are going to be looking for investment instead of trying to just try to push it off the ground by yourself?
Yeah, to compete and build a search engine with some of the other players that are out there, it takes a lot of capital. Also, building a consumer business where we're not going to have super early revenue in the beginning, like we were still trying to figure out the business model. It just made sense that we were going to need some sort of investment to try to scale and kind of grow quickly, and then also get to our revenue targets eventually. So I think the main factor is, let me think about this a little bit, because I mean, my opinion's changed over time. I think originally I would say bootstrapping is something that you only want to pursue for a small business, but I actually think that's changed. I think that bootstrapping is an opportunity if you just don't want to scale really quickly. Like that's kind of the nature of a fundraising style business. So if you don't want to scale quickly, like you can still become a massive company almost bootstrapped or maintaining a lot of ownership of the company. I just think it's going to be slower. There's going to be some ups and downs, and you're going to need revenue earlier. So that's kind of the main consideration that you need to have. And then also some people just might not enjoy fundraising or like the fundraising side of and what it entails for your business. Like when you take on capital, you now have somebody that you're accountable to. You have investors that you have to explain yourself to. And some people are maybe not getting into entrepreneurship to do that. Maybe they just want to be the kind of master, king, queen, whatever you want to call it, of their business, and they don't want to have other outside input, and that's okay. So that maybe those are the things to kind of hone in on if you're trying to decide between bootstrapping or fundraising.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. And before we finish, I want to hit you with another very general question. Where do you see the future of e-commerce going, since you're working in this field?
Yeah, this is obviously something we think about all the time. I think we started building Deft because SEO, advertising, all of the stuff that you see on these e-commerce sites today is like it's like snake oil that's trying to be sold to you. Like if you go on Amazon today and you type in I want pet friendly sectional, you're going to come up with like mostly slipcovers. So they're not even giving you sectionals. They're giving you something you didn't even ask for as a consumer, because the marketer on the other side has an incentive. They're trying to get the product out in front of you, and it's not necessarily what you want. And I think that problem is only going to get worse. Like search engines have been built up on SEO and paid for by advertising for so long. The e-commerce has like gotten completely out of control with SEO. Like go on Amazon and look at a title today. It's like 4 paragraphs long. It says some crazy name when you read it. And that's not what I'm looking for as a consumer. I kind of want a privacy focused search that is going to give me exactly what I want every time. So where do I see e-commerce going? If that problem continues to get worse, we're going to have a very serious trustworthiness problem. When you introduce something like an LLM or an AI into the process, they do start to hallucinate too. So compound SEO advertising with hallucination, and you're going to have completely irrelevant results for people. Like it's not going to be what they want at all. And discoverability is going to be incredibly difficult for all these amazing small brands that are out there that a consumer maybe wants to find. So for us, we're building trustworthy search. I don't know what the interface is necessarily going to look like over time. I do think that could also change. Like the nature of search is already starting to change. People are kind of interacting with chatbots and having a conversation with people. I don't think that that's necessarily the way to go for e-commerce, but I do see some interface changes in the way that search happens. And if you try Deft, you can actually do some of those kind of like where we think search is going, which is combine text and visual. So something that's kind of magical that you can do on Deft that you can't do elsewhere is you can upload a picture of, say, those headphones that you're wearing and say, I want these, but in black or in a different color. And you can kind of have these really unique experiences searching for something that you can't do. And so I do think that that's kind of the way it's going. We'll see what other technologies come out that change e-commerce even more in the future. Because if we start getting into VR or any of that stuff, like, I mean, e-commerce is a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, I really like that you brought this up. Somehow a demo of how Deft already looks like. Because I remember from watching that early pitch, and you like demoed how it works.
Sure.
And I really won't forget that in Amazon, when you search for like couch, that looks like this or something like that, you will never get the result you want. But
oh, no way.
But or you will even get like something completely out of the league. So I really love that you're solving this with Deft, and I love the approach because it's basically it's like you would be talking to ChatGPT or something like that, but just searching. So
yeah, we had even in the earliest days, we knew natural language that was like, why for all these e-commerce sites can I not describe what I'm actually looking for? Like I have a vision. I don't want it to just be a couple of keywords. Like I want this and maybe in a different color with some, maybe these materials. And so the Deft had a giant search box. And we introduced that a long time ago. That was like, when I talked to you about that first MVP, it was like a big text area that you could fill in. And yeah, that still exists to this day. And it's only gotten better.
To finish it off, could you share the best advice you ever received, or even the best advice you ever heard, and maybe tell us how did you implement it?
Yeah, I honestly don't know if there's one piece of advice that was the most incredible to me. If I was to pull a piece of advice, it's probably from like a more recent book that I'm reading. But the thing that I would leave your listeners with is not necessarily a piece of advice, but more of a phrase that I think allegedly Leonardo da Vinci lived by. And it's been an important kind of word in my life for a long time, or phrase in my life. And I'm going to butcher this for everybody out there that can speak Italian. I think the word is ostinato rigore, and it means constant or stubborn rigor. And I kind of translate that into persistence, or the pursuit of excellence. And I don't think I've gotten as far as I have because I'm the smartest or I'm the most well-educated founder out there. I think it's because I put in a lot of effort and I strive to keep learning, and I'm not afraid to fail. And that's kind of what that phrase stands for me. And so hopefully other founders can live by that too and kind of adopt it into their psyche.
Definitely something to remember. Zach, thank you for your time. It was great to have you on the pod. We wish you all the best with Deft and hope to chat again soon.
Thanks so much.